How many people spent years believing they were lazy, unmotivated, careless, or simply not trying hard enough when they were actually living with ADHD? For decades, ADHD has been misunderstood, oversimplified, and reduced to stereotypes. Many people grew up hearing they just needed to focus harder, be more organized, or apply themselves, while silently wondering why every day seems so much harder than it appeared for everyone else. And welcome to Hidden in Plain Sight, the podcast about the parts of ourselves people don't always see: the overthinking, the growth, the burnout, the healing, the humor, and the everyday experiences that make us human. I'm Extrovergent, ADHD brain, and today we're talking about the hidden truths of ADHD, the realities that often go unseen, the misconceptions that continue to follow it, and what it means to live with an ADHD brain. Joining me today is Ryan Mayer, a certified ADHD and life coach with Ryan Mayer Coaching, who has a team of ADHD coaches who help people with what? ADHD. He has dedicated his work to helping people better understand their brains and build practical strategies and embrace who they are without shame. Through both his professional work and personal experience, Ryan has helped countless individuals move beyond the myths and discover what's really happening beneath the surface. Ryan, welcome to Hidden in Plain Sight. Let's just start with your story. When did you realize your brain experienced the world differently?
Well, Extrovergent, before we get to that question, I just got to say, it would be great to just have you on call to provide the soundtrack of my everyday life. Because you were sounding really good. Like, Ryan's on a mission. I'm like,
Yeah.
that sounds really good.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
I'm so excited to be here. And I just want to give our host here a quick shout out for all the work he's doing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I'm also going to make a bold statement right off the rip here and just say one of the best names of any neurodivergent creator out there. So when you and I connected first, like a few years ago, immediately I was drawn to Extrovergent, like extroverted, neurodivergent. Come on. It's just so good. So I just
Thank
want to
you.
say bravo.
Thank you. I
Chef's
remember
kiss.
that day like it was yesterday.
Yeah, so great. To your question though, my journey first started. So many of us on our journey, we have ups and downs and really high highs, really low lows when you have a brain that's wired a little bit differently. And something that was very confusing to me when I was growing up was going through grade school. I was in the gifted classes, and literally the program where it was called Project Challenge, where they would take the really smart kids out to the mobile unit and give us extra assignments because we were just that talented. And I'm saying that because, wow, did I get a big helping of humble pie when I got into 7th grade. I'll never forget because it was pre-algebra. And all of a
Ooh.
sudden, we're going into the quadratic equation. And in science class, we start talking about the periodic table. And that was the beginning of the end of the wonder years of my academics, because it was pretty much a struggle from that point forward for me in any subject that was quantitative as opposed to more qualitative. And where I first knew something was different though, because it's okay, maybe I just wasn't so good with numbers. Or as I like to say, I even say this today, that I have a severe numbers allergy. Okay, that could be a thing, but in classes where I did still do pretty well in high school, I can remember that no matter what course it was, no matter what level, if it was AP or honors or not, I was almost always the last person to finish the exam. And not that I have to, win the race. It's not a race. But I realized, this is really interesting because I know the material, but yet I'm always the last one. I knew that things were a little bit different for me when it took longer for me to process and to finish the exams. So fast forward now into my college experience, and I just decided it's time to embrace, accept that I might need a little bit more time and that that's okay. So for anyone who might be listening, who's still going through, whether it's high school or college, if there are student services available, please make sure that you take advantage of those. I don't know what the official definition of a panic attack is, but I'm pretty sure that in college, in one of the really big stadium seating style lecture halls, uh, I can remember it was an accounting exam, which I, of course, had procrastinated on studying for. Most of my grade was riding on this exam. I had stayed up, probably pulled a nearly all nighter trying to prepare. And then I just remember sitting in class and hearing every person who was chomping their gum, or the worst is when someone, I don't know if anyone can hear this, but like clicking on the pen
Oh,
or
yeah.
tapping their feet. And I'm like looking up and I'm seeing the clock, like, you know, well, I don't, oh, I kind of remember this equation. What does this mean? I remember seeing that, but I don't know what it means. And I had to excuse myself and go to the bathroom, put cold water on my face and calm my heart rate. And after that, I'm like, that's it. I'm going to student services. And silence is golden. And I remember going into the student services and they had study carrels, little barriers basically between you, and you could get earplugs. And I got time and a half on the exam. And wow, it was beautiful. So then, like, I'm finishing college. I'm going to be way better in the real world because I can use all the strengths that I have. Yeah, I'm using air quotes in case anyone was just listening. The real world. Yeah, yeah, exactly. But wow, was that just not the case? Because I was struggling from day one. I'll leave it at that to start off.
It just amazes me how many people spend years trying to fix themselves before they ever realized there was never anything wrong with who they were.
Precisely.
Fast forwarding a little bit, tell us a little bit about what led you to becoming an ADHD coach.
When I was on, I think, my fourth or fifth job after college, I just kept thinking to myself, there's got to be a different way to do this because this just feels so hard. Every day was so hard keeping things organized. And I worked a lot of administrative corporate jobs, very much like corporate setting, usually sales, marketing, customer facing. And what was so infuriating to me was that I knew that I was one of the best, if not the best, on the teams I was on at the most important part, which was interacting with the clients, doing the presentations, conveying the information, inspiring them to take action. But then where the wheels always fell off for me was the follow through, the details,
Yes.
the admin, the mundane work that I just couldn't get my brain to work on. And I remember when I got, as I like to say, liberated from one of my jobs, the day that they let me go, I'll never forget the senior director saying, Ryan, this is a hard day for me because you are such an anomaly. Like, you are an enigma, I think is the word that I used. You're so hard to figure out because you're one of the best that we have. And yet you struggle doing the most basic parts of the job. So we can't keep you because we need everyone to be able to do that. The challenge was, right, I'll say the disappointing part for me was that at several of these jobs, I was gaining more and more awareness around what I needed to be able to show up as my best self. And I'm very proud of myself that I advocated for what I needed. And they were all very reasonable accommodations because I want everyone listening or watching to know a lot of our invisible or non apparent disabilities are recognized by the Americans with Disabilities Act. And I know that in other countries, they have other similar laws put in place to protect our rights, to give us the accommodations, reasonable accommodations to be able to get
Right.
the job done. The frustrating part, though, is that in reality, despite the awareness that is growing around neurodivergent conditions, I always was dismissed as just making an excuse. And when you and I were talking about what this episode was going to cover, the hidden truth of ADHD in this case is that it's not because of laziness. It's not because we don't care. I'm going to make a bold statement, and I hope that people can go along with me on this to see kind of where I'm going. Is asking someone with ADHD to do something that their brain really struggles with would be like asking someone who is in a wheelchair to take the stairs, because that might sound dramatic, but if you think about it, they're not built, their bodies don't allow them to be able to take the stairs in the same way that other able-bodied folks would. Same for us. I can't do my work in the same way that a neurotypical person would. The biggest challenge, though, is that people can't see that. It's a non-apparent disability. So the things that were crippling to me were invisible to everyone else.
Completely understandable because people look at everything that you do great and it's just like, there's no way that this person could be struggling because
Exactly.
it's not obvious to them. And one of the interesting things about the workplace is not even just the workplace, let's just say in general,
Yeah.
you don't know what that person's experience is with ADHD. You don't know if they believe stereotypes, if they grew up in an age where there was a lot of stigmas, and it's not always safe to disclose. Just like you pull the trigger and a gun and the bullet comes out, you can't put that bullet back in there.
Mhm.
Once you disclose that you have ADHD, you can't take that back. I think about some of my experiences in the workplace to where it's just like, am I going to say anything or am I not going to say anything? So, one thing that I've learned to do is ask the person, what do you know about ADHD? And just shut up and listen. Based off of that, that'll decide where can I go from there. I said that to some people and they disclose, oh, I have ADHD, or they have a family member who has ADHD. But I also had somebody tell me, oh, that means you can't focus. And that's all they focused on. And then somebody else said, they're so effing hard to deal with and nobody likes them. Imagine if you were to disclose to that person. That's not going to be good for you. And then some of the things that you can do, you don't need to actually disclose. So it's one of those things to where if I was a student in your class, Ryan, or you have a meeting, I can show up a little bit early and I can go, hey, Ryan, I just wanted to make sure that I was going to be respectful and I didn't want you to think I was being disrespectful. So while you're talking, I might just stand in the back for a little bit because that helps me focus. You didn't disclose anything. And I think our stories is one that many people can connect with, but it also highlights something bigger that the world still misunderstands ADHD.
Oh my gosh, yeah. And want to make a comment on something that you said
Sure.
because I completely agree with you. If I could turn back time and go back to my earlier self. Actually, you know what? I was going to say I would tell myself, like, don't disclose. But you know what? I think this journey has happened the way it was supposed to happen anyway, because you had asked me about how I got into coaching. But I want to talk about that point you made about not having to disclose. Despite me saying everything about the Americans with Disabilities Act and it's our right to
Right.
get reasonable accommodations, when people ask me, hey, do you think I should disclose? I tell them, don't disclose. And they're like, wait, what? Like, aren't you out here like fighting and advocating and spreading awareness? Yes. But to your point, most people are not up to speed on what's happening. So exactly like that example you gave about the classroom, what I always recommend to people. So if anyone's listening, or if you're watching this and you're thinking, yes, I'm struggling at work or I'm struggling in school or in life with ADHD, if you're not sure what the person's understanding is of neurodivergent conditions, you don't have to disclose in order to get accommodations. So just like in that example of, hey, I might need to stand in the back of the classroom, or I might need to sit in the front of the classroom so that I can pay attention better. And then at work, here's the thing I want people to take away. Instead of disclosing, you can say this line: I do my best work when dot dot dot. Like, in order for me to show up as my best self, I may need a written agenda of the meeting ahead of time. Or can we be sure that we send a follow up email with the action items and when the deadlines are? Because I want to make sure I do a great job for you, boss, Mr. or Miss Manager. So I know I can do my best work for you as an employee if I get those things. Can we make sure we do that? And I said nothing about disclosing. So going back to that original question though. So how did I get into coaching? Well, out of desperation, essentially, because there I was in the corporate prison, I mean my cubicle for my
Whoop.
job. And sorry, a little slip there. Just kidding, because it did feel
Uh-oh.
like a prison. Look out. No, but I can just remember sitting there and thinking, no one understands how hard this is for me. And I was desperately Googling, like trying to find resources for someone with ADHD in the workplace. And I ended up stumbling upon the 2018 International ADHD Conference. And I'll never forget, my first thought was not like, wow, this is amazing. Like, I hope they can help me. My very first thought was, wait a minute, we're organized enough to have our own ADHD conference?
It's like, what?
Okay, I gotta see this just because this is gonna be interesting. I ended up going there just as a adult with ADHD looking for ADHD support. And the universe had a bigger plan, I guess, because that's where I first learned about coaching and that I didn't even know that there was an ADHD specific life coaching because the only life coaching I had ever experienced or had contact with, I just didn't have the greatest feeling about it. And I'll never forget when I met the director of ADCA, which is the ADD Coaching Academy, David Gewerk, he's the founder. He said, I think you'd make a great coach. And my response was, wait, you mean like a life coach? Well, no, that's not me.
Who, me? What?
And
No.
I said, no, I'm good. I've got this corporate sales job. This is definitely going to be the one. And then you see above my head, 6 months later, Ryan's in deep depression. And uh, mental health is no joking matter, but I'm only saying that how many times have we thought to ourselves, like, yes, this is going to be the thing, whether this is going to be the relationship that works, or this is going to be the hobby I stick with. This is the planner I'm going to
I don't
use.
know how many times I've changed careers or,
Right.
or things like that.
And this was yet another example of, yep, now this one's not working out either. And I was really in a dark place emotionally, mentally, because I just felt if I had to describe it in one word, it would just be hopeless. Like, I'm getting a little emotional up when I tell the story because that's when I decided. Because my wife, who is an amazing support for me, she said, hey, it's really hard for me and your family to see you this way. You're such a happy person. So, I mean, we want you to be happy. So, what can we do? And she asked me a question, which it turns out in hindsight was a really good coaching question. She said, if you could do anything, any career, what would you do? And what was amazing to me was I hadn't really thought that much about the conversation at the conference, which was the year before that, about coaching. But right back to that moment, and I had this like flash of clarity. I think I want to be an ADHD coach. And that's what I said to her. And the reason why, which is my very scenic route to get to the answer to your question, which is I have now become the resource that I so desperately needed, but I couldn't find. And so when I'm having a rough day, which is on the regular, I just remember back to how hard it was and that I know that there are people out there. You might be listening or watching this right now. I just want to tell you don't give up because there's people here who can help you. And that's why I decided to start my coaching practice.
That's pretty deep. And you made it. Look at you now. It's just like you are ADHD Coach Ryan, the ADHD Coach Ryan. And I remember I'm like, what? ADHD Coach Ryan wants to come and talk to me? And it's just like, who, me? I was like, yes, do you know who you are?
Well, what I feel is my calling and why I was so excited to come on your podcast and any podcast that will have me is I really feel like it's my duty to, and I wore one of my shirts from my ADHD awareness line, which I'll show right here. It
I like
says
that.
hope. So if you can't see it, or if you're not watching right now, maybe you're driving or something, it's kind of inspired by the structure. I think it's in DC or and then I know there's one in Philadelphia, but it's the love, like LOVE, but it's HOPE, and the O is a brain. So I want to be a beacon of hope for others who are still out there in the darkness who are really struggling.
Absolutely. And the thing about people who struggle, I feel like us as ADHDers, there's a lot happening beneath the surface. And to some of the points that you mentioned earlier, people don't necessarily see the struggle because the struggle can be invisible. And one myth that I would love to retire forever is that we are lazy. We are not lazy because I feel like lazy people don't want to do anything. For me, it just eats me up if I can't do the task. And then with that comes the shame and the guilt of not being able to get that task done. And it's pretty rough because I want to do it. And then the other side of it is like, yes, I can hyper focus on certain things, but it's not like, oh, let me cut on this hyper focus switch. Yay, I'm focusing. It doesn't work like that. And I can't always control what I focus on or how long I focus on something. Or it's like I can focus on a job, but then there might be another day where I focus on drama, nonsense, or a TV show or a comment that somebody made and then just start replaying that over and over again. There's a lot that's beneath the surface that people don't always see. So for you, what is one myth that you wish people would retire forever?
Well, first off, I just want to touch on this because as you were talking about hidden under the surface, the image that comes to me, and I actually just ironically earlier this week helped to write a blog post for one of my friends and fellow ADHD content creators, Chaya, who's over at sparklaunch.ai. They have a video game that's going to be released soon that helps younger folks, kids with ADHD. It's not live yet, but she has a blog on their website and asked me to write an article. And it's titled 5 Reasons Why People with ADHD Are Not Lazy. So when you brought up this question, I'm like, well, what do you know? And
How about that?
the picture that I chose to use was the picture of a duck on a pond where it's smoothly gliding across the surface, but its legs are working like crazy just under the surface, and nobody can see that. The effect is so real, but it happens under the
Okay.
surface. You know what I'm saying? Like they look
Right.
like they're just cruising, and
But they're
that's the math.
just going.
They have to work like what the duck? Like we are having to work twice as hard as our neurotypical peers to do the same thing. To get from point A to point B, we're using twice as much brain battery power as our neurotypical peers.
That makes me rethink one of the pieces of artwork that I have on my desk. It says, I don't have ducks or a row, but I have squirrels and they're everywhere. But
Yeah,
yeah, I mean, what you said makes a lot of sense. Just because someone makes something look easy doesn't mean it feels easy. So people often judge the outcome without ever seeing the effort it took just to get there.
yes. If anyone's out there and they're listening, you're a manager, you're a people leader in the workplace or at your church or in your community. My biggest piece of advice is please be sure to take the time to acknowledge the work that people are putting in. Something that I said in the blog post is when someone struggles to start a task or they're missing deadlines or they seem inconsistent, I mean, the assumption of laziness, it's easy to make, and I get it. They're just being lazy. They don't care about it. But that assumption is wrong. One of the things that really struck a chord and resonates with me that I wanted to share with the audience, this helped me to reframe the way I think about myself and my ADHD brain. Most people, I'm going to say neurotypical people, they can prioritize based on importance. I'm going to say that again. People who are neurotypical can prioritize based on importance. Our brains are unable to do that. We prioritize instead on interest. We have an interest based prioritization system. I'm just thinking like Mac versus a PC. There's nothing wrong. They're both good systems, whatever. Let's not start an Apple PC fight, everyone. But here's my point. You can get the same things done. They're just different operating systems. So when I'm working with my coaching clients, for example, they're trying to get something done. And many times, and I'm guilty of this too, we keep trying to do things in a neurotypical way and getting frustrated when it keeps not working. What I emphasize to them, and I want to invite everybody who's listening and watching to think about the tactics and the strategies I give my clients, it's all about building momentum. So do something super small. And I know you probably heard this advice before, but hear me out. You have to build momentum. So I do something that I call my startup stack. And what that means is, here's the analogy I give. We want to be driving on the highway to get to where we're going, like in our day, so to speak, like the super highway of productivity. But we're expecting we're going to be able to go from our driveway to the super highway, instantly. The problem is you have to drive slowly first. You have to, stop at the traffic light, make a couple turns, and then you're on the on-ramp. The on-ramp is key because that's where you go from the level you're on to the level you need to be to really get into flow state. So for my on-ramp, my startup stack is things like open my client management system, drink water, message my clients, open my email, make sure to hydrate, Public service announcement. Please be sure to hydrate. Thank you.
Yes, coach.
And these things might seem like, okay, like everyone's got to open their email. Everyone's got to do these. Okay, but are you doing it? So you just do these simple things. It builds momentum, it builds confidence, and then you can get going.
Talking about the examples that you gave about Mac and Windows, it's kind of
Yeah.
like, I'm going to go even more controversial, iPhone and Android. That's like trying to take Android software and putting it on an iPhone and wondering why it's not working.
And being frustrated about it and then trying to do it again and again and just getting more and more upset that it's not working when you know it's not going to work.
One of the best things that I've saw to illustrate potential and everything is all about environment. There was an activity where somebody's in a room and they throw up a ball and they say, "Okay, clap one time. Okay, it hits the ceiling. Clap two times." And you keep going. It's just like, why can't you clap 8 times? You need to be able to clap 8 times. It's not that you can't do it. It's that you're not in the right environment. So if I take you outside and you can throw the ball up and now you can clap 8 times, that's a good exercise to do to see you actually can do it. It's not impossible. You're just not in the right environment. And so then people think that they're incapable because they're stuck in that room that's not made for them. So it's just like you might be in an environment or have a system that's not set up for your brain.
Bingo.
Let's go a little deeper because I think this is where a lot of people are going to feel seen. So, why do you feel everyday tasks can feel so overwhelming?
Good news. Earlier, I was trying to think of the name of the person who has done a lot of research on ADHD. Isn't it great when that brain boomerang comes back to you? Ding, 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 ding. It just came back to me. Uh, Dr. William Dodson. Dr. William Dodson is the foremost researcher on RSD. So if you have ADHD and you're not familiar with RSD, this will be really helpful, I think, to help you feel seen and validated. So, RSD stands for rejection sensitivity dysphoria, which means that we have big feelings and we get bruised easily, so to speak. That's why we have a tendency to snap at people or we're reactive, impulsive, because the same areas of the brain that register physical pain, when we experience rejection or even perceived disappointment or rejection from people that we care about, we have that dysphoria. So it's the opposite of euphoria. It's rough. What I want people to remember, I want to kind of touch back on that point I said before. If we keep trying to prioritize based on importance, it's not going to work. Dr. Ned Hollowell and Dr. John Rady co authored the book ADHD 2.0. And in there, they talked about the idea that, and many people feel this way, but they say they do not like the name ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, because spoiler alert for everyone, it's not that we have a deficit of attention. We just have that interest based nervous system. So we need to have something that's interesting, urgent, novel, emotionally engaging. That's why we procrastinate, because we can't engage until the stakes are really high or there's consequences involved. So I just think it's important for people to know that this is not your problem with a work ethic.
I do know Dr. Dotson, one of his frameworks that you're talking about is NCUP, which is interest, novelty, challenge, urgency, and passion. And you could also stack those different things. So you can make something interesting by finding a way to make it more fascinating,
Yeah.
make task more fun. Do you want to listen to your favorite podcast like Hidden in Plain Sight? You want to listen to music or something like that? Novelty, change your environment, your tools, your approach to the problem. If you're stuck, go to a coffee shop or something like that. Body double with a friend. If you have colorful pencils or something like that, do that. Challenging, create a game out of it. So, one thing that I like to do is I have a timer. This timer is a little different than yours. It has a light on it, and then the
Ooh.
light is green. And after a while, the light will turn yellow when I can set when I want to turn yellow. or then it'll be red. And don't worry, I'll put a link to the timer. But you can race against the clock and say, okay, how many emails can I answer in 10 minutes? You can also go, okay, how much can I clean in this room for 5 minutes? You can make that challenging. And then the urgency, the ADHD brain thrives on tight deadlines that trigger adrenaline. So you can create artificial deadlines, use a Pomodoro technique, or rely on body doubling. And then passion is connecting the task to your core values. What is the long term purpose or desire to help somebody else? And so those are the things that really help motivate an ADHD brain. And so going back to what we were talking about before you remembered his name, why do you feel everyday tasks can feel so overwhelming for people with ADHD?
Basically, because it takes so much more energy for us to do the things that other people can do really easily. For example, things like personal hygiene. I have a client right now that we're working on some strategies because he will sometimes go days without showering. And it's not because he wants to do that or likes doing that. There's just a sense of overwhelm to do that. For those of you who are just listening, I'm holding up, I like to just do some doodles and some artistic things. So I'm holding up what I call my brain battery. It's got a brain in it and it shows a fully charged battery. What I want you to think about is, what are the tasks that energize you and recharge your brain? Like for me, it's coming here on the Hidden in Plain Sight podcast with Extrovergent. Connecting with other human beings, that charges me up. While going through my email inbox or paying bills or sending invoices, the things that are needed in business sometimes, like that drains my battery. So just know that if there's someone in your life who is neurodivergent, they may be spending a ton of mental energy trying to regulate their emotions, not get distracted, get back on task if they do. It just consumes so much cognitive energy. So while somebody else might be able to do something with no problem, ours takes much more energy. I would say that, plus going back to the ADHD 2.0, John Rady and Dr. Ned Hallowell, instead of ADHD, they came up with this acronym called VAST, VAST, which stands for Variable Attention Stimulus Trait. So they said nobody likes hearing that they are disordered. They're just saying this is just part of who you are. It's a trait. And you can get attention, but it varies, and it's about the stimulation. How much does it stimulate you? So I think those are some of the reasons that people are trying to do things in a neurotypical way when that's not how they're wired.
Speaking for myself, and I know a lot of people can relate to this. When I look at everyday tasks, the everyday task isn't just that one task. Most people go, oh, I'm going to do the laundry. It's not just doing the laundry. You have to take the clothes out the hamper. You have to sort the clothes. You have to put it in the wash machine. You have to add the detergent and all the other additives. Then you have to take it out. You have to dry it. You have to put it away and you have to fold it. Oh my God, that is 47 tasks. That is just not doing the laundry. And that's why I feel we get overwhelmed. And one of the hardest things about invisible struggles is trying to prove that they are real because somebody might not be able to understand why we can't do something or how we might see things. I just get overwhelmed at the fact, like, I have to do the laundry or I have to do the dishes. Actually, talking about the laundry, there's something that you do to help you with your laundry. What is that?
Can you share the quick origin story of how we met? Because that'll lead right into that. Because I was thinking the very same thing when you were saying that.
So Coach Ryan goes live on Instagram, and his show is called Folding with Friends, where him and his wife they put a timer on. He folds his clothes while he talks to people. And I made a comment in the comment section, and you said, "Oh, extrovergent. I like that." That's why I trademarked extrovergent.
I'll pick it up there and run with it. So even just in the time that we've been talking, the audience, you've heard me say that I know what I do well, I know what I don't do well, and I know what energizes me. And what energizes me is other human beings. I know I don't want to do laundry. Not many. I don't want to say no one, but most people don't get excited to do laundry, neurotypical, neurodivergent, whatever. But we all have to do it. Okay, fine. So I sort of gamified in a way. How can I make this more fun? I can make it more engaging because it's funny how our bodies and our brains will follow if we help them get going. For example, folding with friends, we have it scheduled at 8:45 p.m. Eastern every Tuesday night, and it helps my wife and I get the kids to bed faster so that we can come downstairs, we can get the live started. And here's what's crazy, and this just proves so much of the work that I do. is that if we don't do folding with friends live in front of 500,000 of our closest friends, we don't do our laundry. It's almost the end of Thursday. We didn't do it this week because our son had a baseball game we were at. But because we didn't do folding with friends this week, our laundry's not put away yet. So even today, I was still folding socks and I couldn't get it all done because I didn't have the time. Anyway, this helps us to get it all done one time. It engages with people. And I did it because that's a way that works for my brain. So my question to everyone is, what's something you struggle doing? Maybe put that in the comments. And what's something you could do to try to make it more fun and engaging?
Try out a few different things. You know what works for you. Maybe you don't know what works for you, but test out a few different things. And just because something works one day doesn't mean it's going to work another day. It's kind of like a tool. You have a hammer, a screwdriver, a saw. You can't use a hammer on everything. Sometimes you need your other tools. So experiment with different things and see what works for you. And one thing I never want this podcast to only focus on is struggles, because there are some strengths to ADHD. I believe that we are really good at problem solving. We can be creative, innovative, have passion, resilience. And I think a lot of us are funny. And there's a lot to it. It's not all bad. It's not all good either, but it's also not all bad. And I can't speak for everybody, because for some people, they do struggle more than others. And it makes me think of a question for you.
Yes.
And I'll answer first. The question is, what environments allow people with ADHD to thrive? And my answer to that is, I believe we can thrive in environments where we don't have to mask. And my definition of masking is pretending to be a quote unquote normal person, or the perception of what I think a normal person is, to where I'm just sitting there going, "Hi, my name is Extrovergent, and I'm making eye contact with you. And this is so much fun because I enjoy talking to you. And now imagine if I use this voice all day long." Imagine how exhausting that would be. It's just one of those things where I feel like where you can be your authentic self. Because I feel like, not I don't feel like, I know for a fact, when I mask, I burn out. And imagine masking for days or months and years. And for me, when I burn out, it feels like a depression without a reason to be depressed, where
Yes.
I can completely shut down and turn into a vegetable. It's sometimes it literally gets that bad. So back to you. What environments allow people to thrive with ADHD in your opinion?
Similar to what you were saying, places where we're able to show up as our perfectly imperfect selves, a place that leverages our strengths and either has grace around the things that we struggle with or that can provide some support. So it's really either searching for a new job or they're an overworked, overwhelmed entrepreneur or leader. There's a pretty simple exercise. And this is something I would encourage the audience to think about doing if you're feeling like you're heading towards burnout or depression, to take a sheet of paper, or you could do it in a digital format, of course. Make two columns. On the left side is things that energize me. On the right side is things that drain my battery. So another way to say it is, on the left is things I love, and on the right side, things I hate. And list those out. And what I think you'll find is, and I know as I'm reviewing back on my corporate jobs, there was way more of the things that did not get me energized than there were the things that did. So environments where people that are neurodivergent can thrive are the ones that have more things that energize them than they have things that don't, and that like take their energy. Which it sounds so simple, but yet for over a decade, I mean almost 15 years, I kept trying to justify, like, yeah, I know, but like this is where I want to be. I want to be in this environment. I need to figure it out. I'm going to just keep grinding and grinding. But that was never where I was meant to be. So if that resonates with you, just know that it's okay to need something a little bit different.
And our challenges don't erase our strengths, and our strengths don't erase our challenges. You don't have to become someone else to succeed. Sometimes success looks like finally becoming more of yourself.
My gosh, totally.
So, for somebody who's thinking, okay, that sounds like me, where do I go from here? For practical advice, I do have a question for you.
Well,
What's one thing?
first I have to interrupt you to share something
Go ahead.
very ADHD, which is
ADHD moment.
I ADHD side quest sponsored.
Dun, dun, dun.
Sponsored by Ryan's Brain. So I don't know how this happened, but at some point during our interview, a fly got into my office. And so here's me over here trying to focus. Okay, I think he went. So
Focus,
I
focus,
went,
forward
I went, oh,
focus.
like, don't look at the fly. Okay. So I think he just flew out. So I think we're good. But I was like, I can't keep going. So that was a
Oh no, that
reasonable.
fly has to go.
Yeah. Like, so that was me authentically embracing my needs and not trying to mask. I hope he's gone. If not, I'm going to kill him. I wanted to make
Oh
this
my God, he's
comment.
on your hat.
Stop it.
No, I'm just kidding. Or is he? I don't know.
For everyone's knowledge, he's not on my hat. Ah, he's still in here. Can't make this stuff up. So if you see Ryan frantically waving his brain battery around, it's because he's trying to kill the fly. Remarkable strengths and unique challenges. That's how I describe us. And what's the next step? I would say find a community that accepts you for who you are, where you don't have to mask. And I'll be honest, even around family members, I've had clients from 25 different countries around the world, which is just amazing to say. And I'm so humbled I get to do that. But yet there's people under my own roof and in my own nuclear family who still don't understand me as well as these folks around the world do. So I know you and I were talking about this right before we hit record. But what never ceases to just blow my mind is how similar so many of us that are neurodivergent are. Like, regardless of our background or our life journeys, we just have so many overlapping pieces. So, back to the question, if this is resonating with you, what should you do? Find a community. For example, I have a digital community, and if any of your audience extrovergent, I know you have a community too, but I would love to welcome people in, even if you want to set up a call with me. It's free. I just want people to know they're not alone. That's the biggest takeaway, because for so many years I felt so lonely. So what I tell people on calls is the one thing I can't let you do is not take action. At the first indicator that you're kind of starting to spiral, reach out to somebody. And I know Extrovergent did a great job of that. So I want to shout him out. About a month ago, he reached out to me right away when there was some funky stuff going on and he just needed to bounce some ideas and some thoughts. And that's what you need to do. Know that there are people out there that are ready to help you.
Absolutely. And thank you for that. And I
You're welcome.
think something that people can start to do that would make their life a little easier might sound a little cliche, but try to learn how your brain works. Try to figure out what works best for you. And I feel like when you start learning how your brain works and what works best for you, at least for me, that was a pivotal point for change. And I like the fact that you said find your community. The neurodivergent community is absolutely amazing. I've met people all around from different backgrounds, different races, different upbringings. And the experience of being neurodivergent really what brought us all together. And it's such a beautiful thing because it sounds cliche to say that you're not alone, but it actually means something when you experience that. I've spoke to people before. They say, I know I'm not alone, but it's great to actually see it. And that really showed me how much of an impact it can be. And progress doesn't always look like huge breakthroughs. Sometimes it looks like giving yourself permission to stop fighting. Healing rarely begins with having all the answers. It usually begins with finally asking yourself better questions. So, Ryan, if someone is listening and they spent years believing that they are lazy, broken, or simply not trying hard enough, what would you want them to know?
There are other people out there that are experiencing the same thing. And as I tell my clients and people that are in my network that, and I think Extrovergent, you're a great example of this, that when you're saying like, you're ADHD Coach Ryan, like just because I have put out some content that has resonated with people or I've coached people for 6 years, this does not mean that I have it all figured out by any means. I still have to fight this fight every single day. And that's not an exaggeration. Like I wish I could say, well, now that I've been coaching for 6 years, here's what I do and it's way easier. No, I wish I could say that. So that's not very encouraging. So what I'll say on the encouraging side is there are things that do make it easier. And I think you made a really good point earlier that I don't think I talk about enough, which is understanding our brain. And I mean, Extrovergent already said it, but I think it bears repeating that. Know what brings you joy. And again, I'm holding up the brain battery. Know what energizes you. I love these kind of conversations because I know I'm going to be buzzing from this and I'm going to feel great tomorrow because I'm still going to be thinking about this conversation. So connecting with other human beings for meaningful conversations, that's what it is for me. That doesn't mean that that's what it has to be for you, but figure out what it is that really makes, I think Steve Jobs said in one of his speeches, find what makes your heart sing and get more of that. And I realized in the working situation I was in, I was not getting that ever, ever. My worst day in the work I do now is better than some of the best days I had in my previous jobs. And I guess kind of my final piece of advice or my thought would be don't care so much about what other people might think because of our sensitivities to perceived rejection or if we disappointed. I think we're just like hyper vigilant on that. Like, oh, did I upset someone? Or I hope that they don't hate me. We're not going to be able to please everyone. And that's kind of a hard thing for us to grasp sometimes, but just be who you are and that's okay.
Thank you very much for sharing that. I
Yeah.
think that's going to touch a lot of people. And if people want to find you, how can they go about connecting with you?
Yeah, thank you. Again, even if it's just for a phone call to just connect with someone who understands, I'm so happy to do that. The link is going to be in the show notes to schedule a call with me. Just a quick little rundown on the things that I offer. I offer body doubling services, which that's not like a bodyguard or a stunt double. It's an environment where you can virtually co-work with other people who have ADHD to help you to stay on task. In 2026, I started a new offering where it's called the PAL program, which is the Professional Accountability Liaison. So for a very small hourly fee, you can actually have another person virtually sit with you to talk through what you're trying to work on. But as far as, and so I just want to put it out there because I'm really proud of that. The clients that are using it are loving it, but I haven't talked about it enough. But if you want to find me, you can go to my website, which is ryanmayercoaching.com, and that's Mayer. On all the socials, it's either Ryan Mayer Coaching or ADHD Coach Ryan. So I'm on all the different platforms. But yeah, drop me a note. Would love to connect with you because our community is growing and I love just connecting with others like me.
Thank you. And if you would like to connect with the Extrovergent Brain Crew, I will put the Discord link in the show notes. So, Ryan, thank you so much for being here and for sharing your story, your wisdom, and your heart. And if today's conversation taught us anything, it's that ADHD is far more complex than the stereotypes. Behind every missed deadline, forgotten appointment, or unfinished project is a person who's often trying harder than anyone realizes. Maybe the goal isn't to become someone different. Maybe the goal is to be better, to better understand yourself. Give yourself the grace you've always deserved and stop measuring your worth by somebody else's expectations. Because the things we hide are often the things that connect us the most. So whether you have ADHD, love someone who does, or simply came here to learn, I hope today's conversation reminded you that understanding creates compassion. Compassion creates connection. And connection reminds us that none of us have to do this alone. Thank you for joining us for Hidden in Plain Sight. Until next time, be kind to yourself, give yourself grace, and remember to love yourself for just the way that you are. Have a good day, friend.